Look at these images carefully. December 23, 2025, while Putin was launching the biggest attack of the war against Ukraine, something extraordinary was happening. 1,000 kilometers away, inside Russia itself, the country's second-largest petrochemical complex turned into a fireball, and that was just the opening move. Keep watching, because what happened next is impressive. But to understand how we got to this point, we need to go back 11 days to a mistake that Russia should never have made. December 12, 2025. Port of Chornomorsk, Odessa region. A ship was approaching to dock the Sancti, a commercial vessel carrying vehicles and heavy cargo, flying the Panamanian flag but owned by the Turkish company Sankdenizcilik. The ship was carrying humanitarian aid and food, a legitimate commercial operation, nothing military. And then Russian missiles cut through the sky. One of them hit the Sancti directly right after it docked.
A ship that was transporting vehicles, a ship carrying heavy vehicles, Oria Paracusa, must have been killed. A ship that was transporting
heavy. The explosion was massive. A huge fire took over the bow and the bridge of the ship.
Ship that was carrying
The crew had to evacuate under emergency conditions. Miraculously, no sailor died, but the ship itself was severely damaged. The images quickly spread. A Turkish ship attacked by Russia in the middle of a completely peaceful commercial operation. And here's the problem. Turkey is a member of NATO and also controls the Bosphorus Strait, the only exit from the Black Sea. Until that moment, the Turks had been maintaining relative neutrality, but Putin had just destroyed that neutrality. The Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs reacted strongly, calling the attack a threat to the viability of international trade and maritime security. And 3 days later, Russia attacked another Turkish ship, the Viva, a tanker carrying sunflower oil. A Russian drone hit it in the grain corridor. More evidence that Russia was deliberately targeting Turkish assets in Kyiv. President Zelensky was watching all of this. Russia had been carrying out a systematic campaign to strangle the Ukrainian economy. Since they lost naval control in the Black Sea, they changed tactics. If they couldn't block ports with ships, they used missiles and drones instead. The goal was to make operating in Ukrainian ports so dangerous that insurance would become too expensive and no shipping company would accept the risk. The plan was working. The Ukrainian economy felt the impact almost immediately. But by attacking Turkish ships, Russia gave Ukraine exactly what it needed: a political justification, a precedent. In Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, the decision was made quickly. If Russia could attack commercial ships from NATO countries, Ukraine could attack the infrastructure that funds the Russian war machine. Thus, a new doctrine was born, the doctrine of symmetrical retaliation. Zelensky was very clear, saying they would respond symmetrically to all Russian threats. According to him, the Russians must feel the consequences of what they do against Ukraine. The logic was simple. Ukraine had cheap long-range drones. If Russia made Ukrainian ports dangerous, Ukraine would make Russian ports dangerous. Insurance would go up on both sides, and Putin would lose his money. And all of this brings us back to the night of December 23rd. That night, Putin launched his biggest attack. 38 cruise missiles, 635 drones, and Tu-95 bombers took off from the Caspian Sea and the Arctic. It was a massive saturation attempt to overwhelm Ukrainian air defenses. The sirens blared for hours. Energy infrastructure was hit in Kyiv, and in the west of the country, at least 3 civilians were killed, and large areas were left without electricity. Kyiv and southern Ukraine faced collapses in their electrical systems, leaving people in the dark and without heating in the middle of winter. Putin wanted to force surrender by freezing the Ukrainian people, but while his missiles were falling, while the lights were going out in Kyiv, Ukrainian drones were already flying deep inside Russian territory. The first target was Budyanovsk in the Stavropol region, more than 1,000 kilometers from the front lines. There was the Stavrolen petrochemical complex, owned by Lukoil, the second largest producer of polymers and high-density polyethylene in Russia. This factory produces the plastics used in Russian drones, military vehicles, and ammunition. It's the raw material kitchen for the Russian army. The Ukrainian drones hit the ethylene cracking units and the gas separation workshops, the most critical points. The explosions were enormous. The fire spread instantly. Images verified by analysts show the factory turned into a massive fireball that lit up the night sky. The fire engulfed the entire facility. Experts estimate that Stavropol will be out of operation for months, and Russia could lose up to 20% of its drone production capacity. But Stavropol was just the beginning. While Stavropol was burning, another explosion lit up the sky 500 kilometers to the south in the Krasnodar region at the entrance to the Kerch Strait. The target was the Tamaneftegaz terminal, one of Russia's largest energy export gateways on the Black Sea. That's where the tankers carrying liquefied petroleum gas, crude oil, and fuels depart from. That's where the money that funds the war comes from. Ukrainian drones struck storage tanks and pipelines. Russian authorities were forced to officially acknowledge that a fire broke out at the terminal due to a Ukrainian attack. Maritime reports confirmed that the attack damaged not only onshore facilities but also ships in the port. The Taman terminal was paralyzed. Insurance rates for Russian ships skyrocketed, exactly as had happened with Ukrainian ports. While Putin was cutting off Ukraine's electricity, Ukraine cut off Russia's money. In Temryuk, near the Sea of Azov, another terminal was hit. 2 fuel tanks were destroyed and the fire covered more than 2,000 square meters. But the most shocking attack was the one that took place in the heart of Moscow on December 22. A day earlier, a Russian general left his house in the morning. Vanil Sarvarov, the chief of operational training of the Russian General Staff. He gets into his car, starts the ignition, and then an explosion. A homemade bomb had been planted in the vehicle. General Sarvarov was dead. Ukrainian intelligence confirmed responsibility for the operation. Sarvarov was responsible for training all Russian forces. His elimination not only removes an experienced commander but also disrupts the entire training system as Russia tries to integrate hundreds of thousands of new recruits. He was the 3rd general killed in Moscow that year. Now stop and think. If a general from the general staff isn't safe in Moscow, who is? Paranoia exploded in the Kremlin and the campaign continued. In the Perm region, deep in Russia, almost in Siberia, a fuel train was derailed and set on fire, 9 tank cars destroyed, and half a kilometer of the Trans-Siberian Railway tracks cut. This railway is crucial for transporting tanks, ammunition, and fuel from the factories in the Urals to the front lines. Resistance groups such as the Freedom of Russia Legion claimed responsibility, and the cumulative effect became visible in the streets. In Crimea, in occupied Yalta and Sevastopol, there were kilometer-long lines at gas stations, rationing of 20 liters per customer, and sometimes stations completely out of fuel. A scenario of civil collapse. Crimea, which Putin promised to turn into a paradise, is now a place where people fight for gasoline. When you put it all together, the picture is clear. Between the 20th and 22nd and December 23rd, in just 48 hours, Ukraine carried out a coordinated campaign first, assassinated a general in the heart of Moscow, and on the following night, while Putin launched his biggest attack, Ukraine hit Stavropol, 1,000 kilometers from the Taman border on the Black Sea, Temryuk on the Sea of Azov, and sabotage trains in the Perm region. And Putin, well, he couldn't stop any of the attacks. The truth is that Russia now faces a big problem, a fundamental problem. It's too big. The S-300, S-400, and Panzer air defense systems are advanced, they're good, but there aren't enough systems to protect 1,000 kilometers of front, plus Moscow, plus all the strategic factories and ports. Thousands of systems would be needed. Russia has hundreds. It's the famous problem of the blanket being too short. If you cover your head, your feet are exposed. Putin covered Moscow and the front line became even more unprotected. It took a toll. It cost them. And all this was happening while representatives from the countries were meeting in Miami, trying to make peace. The plan was simple: to create an area in eastern Ukraine where neither side would have soldiers or weapons, a neutral zone, and to stop the war as it is. Zelensky said he was willing to talk, but Putin said no. Russia demanded that Ukraine abandon entire regions that Russia doesn't even fully control. The massive attack on December 23rd was Putin trying to force Zelensky to negotiate from a position of weakness. He knew that the Ukrainian response would come that same night. The message was clear: we will not negotiate from a position of weakness. Do you feel the war too? As you can see, for years the war was contained within Ukraine, the Russian rear was safe, Moscow was at peace, factories were producing, money was coming in, normal life. Putin was selling this narrative: the war is far away, it doesn't affect you. But in December 2025, all those lies came to an end. Ukraine proved three things first: that it can hit anywhere in Russia, there is no safe rear. Second, it can choose the targets that hurt the most: drone factories, oil ports, military railways. Third, Russia can't defend itself. It's too big, too vulnerable. That illusion of a safe rear is over. It was consumed by the fire of Stavros, sunk in the waters of Idaman, blown up in the streets of Moscow. The war that Putin started has come home and it's not going away anymore. Now I want to know your opinion. Russia has always sold itself as an unbeatable military power, but it couldn't even protect Moscow. Do you think Russian defense is as good as they say? Leave your answer in the comments. If this video brought you information you haven't seen elsewhere, share it with someone who needs to understand what's really happening, and subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell for more analysis. See you in the next video.